There we go. Let's get going. It is so good to have you with me today. Welcome. Hello. And whether you're with me on Facebook, on Instagram, or live with me on the webinar, thank you for making time to be with me today. I really appreciate that. I would love it if you would take just a moment to introduce yourself. I'd love to know where you're from. That's always fun to see how international this webinar usually goes. And I would love to also know if you have any iridology background. Now, that's going to be very important today because if I know I've got a lot of people who are brand new to iridology, then I need to do this at like a 30,000 foot level. But if I know I've got people who've got some good foundation in iridology, I'll drop it to like a 20,000 foot level and we can go a little bit deeper. So as you know, I value interaction if you've been with me before, and many of you have. So get in there on the comments box, on the webinar chat if you're with me on the live webinar. And if you're with me on Facebook or Instagram, pop in there with some comments as well. Again, let me know where you're from. And do you have any iridology background? That's going to be very important today as we delve into what we are going to be talking about. I'm going to give you just a moment here to weigh in on things. And just make sure I've got my screen set up so I can see my notes. Jamila, thank you so much for weighing in from Minnesota, and you've got some iridology background. Okay, excellent, excellent. Anybody else? Anybody else going to weigh in? Let me know where you're from and do you have iridology background, because we can go a little bit deeper here. Hi, I took a one-day intro class. Thank you for doing this. Hello from Central California. Sherry, thank you for being there. We've got Brenda with us as well. Welcome, Brenda. And we've got Jackie, who's one of my students right now. She's joining us. Hi, Jack. Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Brenda says she's got several years of iridology experience. Okay. Excellent. So I might be able to go a little bit deeper today than I usually do. So let's see where we end up with this. And for those of you who are on Instagram, I will move my course or my camera closer to the screen when it's needed. Jana Jung says she has done level 1 and level 2. Jana Jung, which school did you do that with? Do you know if it was constitutional or was it David Pesic, or where was it? Because every school has their own version of level 1 and level 2. We've got Carrie Norris from Australia, and she's got some background. Welcome, Carrie. What time is it for you? Is it like middle of the night for you in Australia? CNM. Okay, thanks, Jenna. So it's probably a different version of level 1 and 2 than what IPA offers. That's great. It's good to know this. All right, so when we are doing an iris assessment, we start with identifying our constitution. Now, if you've been with me in previous weeks, we've talked about lymphatic, biliary, and hematogenic. And I just want to interject, Carrie, you are now my hero. It's 3 o'clock in the morning where she's at, and she's joining us. Welcome, Carrie. I hope you're not drinking too much coffee, because that will really mess up your day. And so let's hop back to our presentation. When we do an iris assessment, we always start with the constitution, lymphatic, biliary, or hematogenic. Then we identify our constitutional subtypes, and we don't get into those in these little webinars, over acid, uric acid, febrile, those kinds of things. We don't touch on that in these little webinars because that's getting really deep. And then we identify our structural subtype, which is what we're going to talk about today because it's a little bit easier than the other things. What we always want to do is correlate our clients' health goals, what their symptoms are, with what we see in their eyes, with their diet and their lifestyle. That is going to give us the foundation to understand what questions we need to ask our client and what is the best direction for us to approach their issues from. What is the best recommendation to make for them? And so without having that base of our constitution, our subtypes by color, and our subtypes by structure, it's of absolutely no use for us to look for individual pigments or individual fibers, right? Those things are the filling in the gaps of the assessment, but we need the foundation of the assessment. So again, that foundation of understanding the Constitution and the various types of constitutional subtypes give us the understanding of our client's inherent chemistry, and they inform the recommendations we are going to make for our client. So let's hop right in. And for those of you on Instagram, I'm moving my camera much closer to give you a better view. Here we go. So when we look at eyes, this is one of my clients. She's been with me for about 30 years now. But she's learning more about herself, and I'm learning more about her as we go. I mean, it is a process, right? When I started with her 30 years ago, I was still practicing Jensenian iridology. So the iris analysis I did for her back then is very different from the ones I've done in the ensuing years. And so most recently, when she was in about a year ago, we reshot her eye photos, not because we expected the iris itself to change by much. The fiber structure is not going to change. The basic color is not going to change. But I wanted to monitor this, and I wanted to monitor the sclera, and I wanted to see if there were any additional pigments that had surfaced in her eye. Right. So as we shot, and I had a new camera, right, since the last time I saw her. So I wanted to take her pictures with better equipment, not to do a before and after, because when you change equipment, you cannot do a before and after comparison. You simply can't, because the equipment will change the output, right? So I just wanted to see if there was anything significant that was different. Like you would notice if a pigment had come up, even if you were using old technology versus new technology. You would notice if the lipemic diathesis had formed even with old technology versus new technology. And so there are some things you can compare, but it's not a good before and after comparison. So as I'm looking at her eyes, and Jessica's asking about the camera, I'll share that with you in just a moment. Looking at this client's eyes, she's in her mid-50s. She is single, she's divorced. She's got 2 young adult sons who live with her. And her concern was weight gain. She'd been gaining weight, which is a really common problem with women in their mid-50s. As I'm looking at her eyes, and as we looked at her sclera, we're not going to get into the sclera at all today, but there were obvious indications that she was heading towards type 2 diabetes. And as I'm looking at her eyes, I'm thinking, heading towards type 2 diabetes, looking at some real possibilities of not handling her carbs properly, of ending up in some serious trouble. And I'm thinking, I need to recommend physical activity to her, but what I see in her eyes is that her fibers are very tangled. They've always been tangled. They haven't moved in 30 years, right? They've always been tangled. She's got lots of open structures in her iris, in her irides. And this is all telling me that her connective tissue is not great. So as we're talking about weight and we're talking about the need to be physically active, I asked her specifically, what are you doing for physical activity? And she said, oh, I've got new information for you. And I said, what is that information? And she said, well, I need to be really careful with what I do physically, because we've had some genetic testing done and it's been discovered that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a situation where she is not capable of properly repairing her collagen. That's what holds your body together. So if she damages a tendon or a ligament or a muscle, it'll repair, but it won't repair well. So we had to really talk about what she could do for physical activity to help her, along with diet and supplements, to help her get her blood sugars balanced so she could take off the excess weight she was packing on. So in a case like this, it's not going to be any contact sports. It's not even going to be any high impact sports. when we're seeing this kind of a very loose fiber structure, and when we know that she has a medical diagnosis from genetic testing of Ehlers-Danlos, it's lightweight weight work. So using very light free weights, being careful to avoid repetitive strain injuries. It's walking. I'm not even going to necessarily recommend something like swimming, which can be a real stress on the shoulder joints. We're really going to limit her to walking, to beginner level yoga, and some lightweight weight workouts. Now, Jessica on Instagram is asking, what camera do you have in the newer shots? So these shots were taken with a Canon Rebel T6i. They're now up to, I think, T8i, with an 80mm autofocus macro lens and the Iris Lab IE5 illuminator. That's the entire setup. So, if you look into that, you can buy your camera and your lens locally, and then you buy your IE5 illuminator directly from Iris Lab, Matthew Dahmer in France, and just let him know that I sent you. Okay, because he'll take extra special good care of you. I promise he does. I also do receive a commission, so I'll be really upfront with that. But he takes really good care of the people I send because he knows that I'm going to be following up to make sure he did take care of them. And he would anyways. He's a lovely person. So again, when we are looking at this eye, we are looking for how are the fibers sitting in the eye. And these are very tangled, very gappy. That is an excellent example of what we consider to be a connective tissue iris. Now, as many of you know who've been with me before, and it's so good to see such a big group, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat or in the comments. I'm watching 3 different screens for comments, so hopefully I will catch yours. Getting in here and making sure we've got what we've got. So Megan's asking, what was the camera again? It was a Canon EOS Rebel T6i. Again, you can use any of the Canon EOS Rebels up to, I think they've got a T8i is the newest one. And a 60mm autofocus macro lens. And then from Iris Lab in France, Matthew Dahmer is the engineer there who's created this. He's created the Iris Explorer, the IE5, and that's what these were taken with, the IE5 illuminator. Okay. And Hello Kita is saying these are almost identical to my eyes. Interesting. Interesting. Now, not everybody who has this open weave will have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but they all do fall into that connective tissue disorder. Okay. Here's another one of my clients, Anita, in her mid-40s. Her symptoms were very different. She didn't have any weight gain issues. What she came in with was gut issues, real digestive concerns, and generalized body pain. Now, she is also a trained nutritionist. She studied with the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, which is an amazing nutrition school. I highly recommend them. And she also has been to holistic practitioners around the world looking for answers, and nobody has been able to help her. She's got this very loose weave to her fiber structure, very loose weave, lots of gapping and open areas in there. That's not what caught my attention. That certainly can suggest that there are structural integrity issues with the intestines and structural integrity issues with all of her soft tissues and her connective tissues. However, what caught my attention for her was when we look at the very inner edge of her iris, what we see is it's very gray. There's a gray edge, and it looks like someone took little scissors and snipped little bits out of the edge. That alone tells me that I could give her all the collagen in the world. I could give her all of the minerals in the world that should help with her structure. but her stomach lining is not going to let them work, right? This is suggesting a deficient stomach lining. Genetically, she didn't do this to herself. And so we approach this very, very simply. She knows her nutrition. She knows what she should be doing. So I just had to encourage her along in that way. And we added some really good digestive supports, a couple of different kinds of digestive enzymes to her. And within a matter of about a month, she came back in saying, my energy's up, my mood's improved, my body doesn't hurt nearly as much. I'm finding I can eat a few more foods than I used to be able to eat, and they feel good. And so when we're looking at the connective tissue, when we're looking at this connective tissue structure, that tells us where some of the weak links are. But in order to fix those weak links, we have to understand how to get to them with nutrition. And that means having to look back in the digestive zones to see if there are any inherent issues with the digestive processes. And if there are, then that is likely where we need to start before we even consider what's going on in the rest of the eye. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me a thumbs up. And so, hello, Keita's asking, can you send me a PM? Yes, I do iris analyses by appointment. And so we need to find a way to get good photos. And then we would do it over Zoom by appointment. So yes, send me a PM. Perfect. All right. Now that you know a little bit about where we're going in our next, about a half an hour together, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Judith Cobb. I am a level 3 certified iridology instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. I am one of only 5 level 3 instructors. This is a new upper level they added about a year ago. I've been in holistic healing for over 4 decades. And I got into it because I had health problems and the doctors were not taking me any closer to an answer. They weren't narrowing things down. And I was a very headstrong young adult. It was like, if you can't give me an answer, I'll find someone who will, right? And so that was when I started getting interested in holistic health. In those 4 decades that I've been a health professional, I have written several books, including Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Health Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook. I've also created and taught courses to go with just about every book I've ever written. And, in all of that time, I've also designed and taught prenatal classes because I was a certified prenatal educator for a few years. Right now, my love is, as far as teaching, is teaching iridology to health professionals, which is why I'm here. So if that is something that is of interest to you, stay with me to the end of our time today, because I will introduce to you some of the details about the next iridology course that I have starting in January. I am also a nutrition professional. I've got the training that allows me to be affiliated with the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutrition Practitioners. I'm also a master herbalist and professionally affiliated with the Alberta Herbalists Association. And I love being affiliated with these groups, with IPA, with CanPro, CanP, and the AHA. They are beautiful communities to be involved with. Just as a tickler, the next live iridology course is starting on January 12th. So if you are a health professional, a herbalist, a nutrition coach, a naturopath, a chiropractor, a medical doctor, an RN, if you've got an anatomy and physiology course, a college level anatomy and physiology course under your belt already, and you're interested in learning iridology at a professional level, then stay tuned because I do have a special invitation for you at the end of this webinar. Here's just a teaser from one of my recent course grads. This is Joyce Lee, the lovely Joyce Lee. fun. It was so fun teaching her. I took an iridology course from another school a few years ago and was left feeling inadequately trained with no confidence in the material or my abilities to perform accurate assessments. Judith Cobb, on the other hand, is a wonderful instructor. She presents the material in this course in a concise, organized way. Every aspect of this course is covered in detail. She clearly answers every question asked, no matter how trivial the student may think it is. Judith structures the classes in a way that makes them incredibly interesting. Clarification is clearly established through her instruction, discussion, and student participation. Upon completion of Judith's course, I feel very confident in my abilities and excited to offer iridology services to my clients. This course is an incredible value, highly recommended. Okay, so with this, let's hop on to another case study. Sound good? If that sounds good, give me a 1 wherever you're at. Give me a 1 in the comments. We've got a few more sets of eyes to look at here as well. So this is Lee. Lee's also been with me for about 25 years. The beautiful thing about doing iridology the way I do it and the way I teach it is it encourages your clients to stay with you for the long term, right? We don't, and this is going to sound gross, we don't vomit everything all over them in one sitting. That gives them way more information than they need. So we do the iris analysis based on what their requirements are right now. So Lee came to me as, again, after she's been with me for many, many years. And she came to me because she was also gaining weight and she was having joint issues in her mid 50s. She might even be early 60s by now. And so with these concerns, we needed to look at lots of things. Her diet, we needed to look at her lifestyle, her supplements. We needed to look at her emotions, what was going on in her head and in her heart. So again, as we look at her, do you see that the structure is not well organized? We've got lots of areas that have gapping, where we've got bits of open structure. Lots of these kinds of things. Areas where things look a little more tangled. So this is all connective tissue, right? We've got lots more in her left eye where things are a little bit more tangled, a little more open. And so with Lee, she was in a transition in her life. She had moved to a new city. She'd recently gotten divorced, moved to a new city, sold the house that she loved to be able to move, did this during COVID, made it difficult for her to find employment. And she was really struggling in a lot of ways that were difficult emotionally, right? And so with her, what we had to do was start with the foundations because she lost her footing. So we started with soups, got her to make lots of pots of homemade soup, freeze them, because living alone, it was easy to skip meals, it was easy to order in, it was easy to default to convenient foods. So we got her thinking more along the lines of basic foods, things she could prepare in batches and freeze. So she would just have to, if she was bored with food, go to the freezer, pull something out, warm it up, and she could eat well. That was the first thing we did. The next thing we did is we had to get her some movement. Everything that she was doing was computer-based. Applying for jobs, the jobs she found were computer-based. And so she was doing a lot of sitting cooped up in her condo. And so we had to get her moving. Suggested, she had a bike, but it was in storage. Suggested, get your bike out. Go for walks in your community. Get to know your community a little bit. And, if the weather's really disgusting, do some yoga, right? But get some body movement. That loose structure, meant we weren't going to put her into kickboxing. We wanted her to do things that would move her body, would encourage her tissues to repair, but to repair at a slower rate than a high intensity workout would encourage. That would allow her to work on her structure in a very thoughtful, very progressive way without creating undue stress. Right. So again, to work on her joints, we needed movement, but we needed the right foods. And we needed to make recommendations that would work for her lifestyle as a very COVID isolated single adult. Does that make sense? Do you see how each set of recommendations isn't just based on the eye, it's based on the person? If that makes sense to you, give me a makes sense in the comments box. And Kelly Lynn on Facebook is saying, what great advice about the bike. Yeah, working with them where they're at rather than making unreasonable things. If I had told her during COVID lockdowns that she needed to go find a yoga studio to do group yoga classes, that wouldn't have worked. She didn't want to wear a mask, right? But getting her outside in the sunshine, in the community, encouraging her to wave and say hello to people on the street. Yeah, they probably would have thought she was crazy, but at least it would have made them smile, right? And that would have made her smile. That would have gone a little ways to breaking some of the depressed mood that she was experiencing from the intense isolation. Here is another client of mine, a woman in her mid-30s, came to me with fertility issues. Now, as we look at this, can you see that even though her eyes are very, very dark brown, we don't see a lot of the individual fiber, but can you see we've got little open gaps in here? Little open gaps. Those little open gaps, along with some things I saw in her sclera, suggests to me that she may genetically have some issues balancing her blood sugars. And guess what? Her diagnosis from the doctors was polycystic ovarian syndrome, which almost always is accompanied by insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. So for this client, yes, she falls into the connective tissue category, but I wasn't concerned about how she repairs tissue. We were more concerned, because she wanted to get pregnant, we were more concerned about helping her to get her blood sugars balanced. And that connective tissue in her case and her sclera gave us the information we needed to know that blood sugars is where we should focus, and diet. So with this client in particular, considering she's still connected tissue, we worked with her diet to get rid of the refined carbs. We boosted her complex carbs and her protein. And we got her, again, being physically active. So Kelly is asking, what would the herbal recommendations be for this? I'm assuming, Kelly, that you're asking about polycystic ovarian syndrome. It depends on the goal of the client. And so Western medicine does metformin, and they will often do Clomid. I agree, it's not the greatest thing on the face of the planet. We do a lot of dietary work, and then based on how we see the hormones settling out, we will choose vitamins and minerals specifically targeted for that client and where their imbalances are manifesting. So it's not just a tight package, the kind of thing where it's one size fits all. Every client I've ever worked with who has had PCOS, there have been commonalities in their programs, and certainly commonalities in the diet recommendations, but very definitely differences in the supplement programs as well. That's the beauty of iridology. And when we combine iridology with other things, we can understand the nuances. So for example, when I'm working with PCOS, I always have my clients track their basal body temperature and their cervical mucus on an app like Fertility Friend. And I have them give me access to their Fertility Friend account so I can monitor what we see. And with that, I am able then to tweak their programs on the fly when we combine that with their eyes and their symptoms and what we've already done diet-wise. And it's very, Kelly is saying, nice, that's great, individual-based medicine. Always an individual approach, because No two people are the same. They may be similar, but not the same. This is exactly how I teach iridology. And we'll talk about this more in a minute, but when I'm teaching iridology and we're practicing, we are always practicing not on a generic level, but very much on a very specific individual level. So important. These eyes are the eyes of a young woman who's in her mid-20s. She has a bit of a weight issue, and she again has joints. She has connective tissue. Do you see how gappy and how disorganized these fibers are? If you see how these fibers look kind of tangled, give me the word tangled in the comments. Do you see that? There's nothing we're going to be able to do to straighten these fibers out. This is her genetic inheritance. This tells us that what we need to work with, right? It tells us that her connective tissue tends to not be as resilient. And when we know that, it teaches us what questions to ask. In her case, she wanted help with weight. I needed to ask about her joints, because if her joints are achy, is she going to be able to be physically active? Not as easily, especially since her physical activity of choice is walking, but her knees hurt, right? So what we needed to do with her, again, was figure out the knees, of course, are partially because of the weight, but also partially because she's not repairing connective tissue well. Why is she not repairing connective tissue well? Again, for her, it goes back to digestion and diet. Her diet was very high in refined carbohydrates, which are very acid forming. That will always go to the joints. So we had to do diet correction first, get rid of the refined carbs, build the healthier choices. We had to do diet support. And then we were able to say, let's start a walking program. Let's start with 5 minutes of walking after each meal, just 5 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but you'd be surprised what 5 minutes of walking after each meal does for the blood sugars, for balancing the weight, for helping to take weight off, for helping to process carbs, even refined carbs that were just consumed. And we've gradually worked with her until we've got her to the point where she's walking 20 minutes after each meal and getting beautiful results. Does this all make sense? How every program, even though these people are all connective tissue, every program is individualized based on their goals and other things we see in their eyes. If that makes sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. Let me know that this is making sense. It's never a one size fits all. It's never a cookie cutter program. Sherry's saying yes. Thank you for that, Sherry. This is always individual. And as long as you are creating individual programs, we've got lots of make senses coming in on Instagram as well. As long as you are creating individual programs that show your client you have heard them well and that you are working with them. You're not working with everyone who's got this problem. You're working with this one person. That is what will help them to become long-term clients for you. Sherry says, I love that it is individual. Yeah, this is why I do not do iris analysis on social media. It's why if you post your eye photos on a site that I own or a page that I own, I will not do an iris analysis, because I don't have the ability there to have a conversation with you, to really understand what you need and what you're capable of. You can tell me what your problems are, but that doesn't tell me the details of your diet and your lifestyle, and it doesn't tell me what you're willing to do. Right? We need to craft programs that start with what our client is willing to do. As they see results and as we earn their trust, they are always willing to do more, right? Motivation is a great driver here. This is another one of my graduates, Adam Zukauskas. He's a naturopath and a herbalist in the UK. And he came to me with iridology training already under his belt. This is what he said about the course. Having had comprehensive iridology training in the past, I can attest that the dynamic iridology course is well-rounded and covers all the necessary basics, embellished with the teacher's own experiences and discoveries. There's been a lot of those over 4 decades, I'll tell you. The course is taught from up-to-date information, and it is clearly apparent how much work she puts into staying in the forefront of iridology research. The hidden gem in this iridology course is the ongoing support that Judith kindly offers, which I find to be an invaluable gift and resource. And hello, Kita says the conversation is so important. It is critical. It is critical. And as practitioners, we need to listen. We need to learn to hear what they're not saying as well in order to drive the conversation deeper, right? So important. So let me tell you a little bit about the next course for those of you who might be interested, and I'm hoping that's many of you. The next course start date is January 12th, 2023. And you might want to make a note of this URL, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology-insight, because the only way you can enroll in this course is by having a conversation with me. I only allow 10 students per course. Jack is saying the course is so worth it. She's only 4 classes in and she's saying it's so worth it. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that. I truly do. 4 classes into a 20 class program, right? And she's already loving it. Thank you so much for that. And so, again, I only take a maximum of 10 students per class. If you're a health practitioner, and my definition of that is you have an anatomy, a college level anatomy and physiology course under your belt as a separate standalone class, not something that was woven into a herbal program, but a separate course. The reason for that is if you decide you want to certify with IPA, you have to show a transcript that has that A&P class. My students my students have that A&P class before they come to me, we can go so much deeper in the course. So if you're wondering from what you've seen today or from other webinars you've been with me on, if you're thinking, this could be a good thing, book a call. Let's talk about it. I want to find out where you're at, what your goals are. Do you have that A&P? And is this course going to be a good fit for you? Because if it's not a good fit, honestly, I don't want you in the class. If it is a good fit, I want you in the class. And I don't mean I don't want you to sound harsh. If it's not a good fit, you're going to drop out. And if you drop out, then nobody benefits from it. Right? So I want this to be a really good fit. We'll have a conversation. If it feels right, I'll invite you to enroll. If it doesn't feel right, I'll give you suggestions of other directions you could go. This course will be from 12 o'clock noon to 2:15 Mountain Time. So today we started at 11 o'clock Mountain Time. Now remember, this weekend we changed daylight savings time. I never remember whether we're going on or off, but we're changing time this weekend here in Alberta. So use your international clock in your phone or do a time zone converter online to figure out what time zone it would be for you. The Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths. Nurses, we're getting nurses into the program now, massage therapists who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. I find that way too many holistic professionals see their client, then they go off and on their own time when they're not being paid for it, that's when they're creating their programs for their clients. That is so wrong. So wrong. Do you know any other profession that sees you for the hour, then spends 2 or 3 hours creating a program without charging you for it to email that back to you? Yeah, no, it doesn't happen, right? And we shouldn't be doing it either. When you understand iridology the way I teach it, I will teach you how to do your intake, how to do the iris assessment, and create the program at the level that the client needs to achieve the next step in their health, all in an hour and 15 minutes. And that sets you up for the next appointment where you're going to dive deeper with their eyes, dive deeper with their program, and build the next step of their program so that they can accomplish that. It's building their program step by step and tweaking it as you go so that they don't get overwhelmed, so they can be successful. They will trust you because they understand that you get where they're at and what they are capable of, rather than snowballing them with everything they need to know for the rest of their life. If you want to learn more than just iris markers, if you actually want to learn how the markers play off each other, if you want to be mentored in creating your programs, if you want long-term support, which is what I offer, even after the course is finished. If you want support after the course is finished, then I encourage you, use that link and book a call, because the purpose of this course is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so that you can integrate what you already know about nutrition and herbology and flower essences and aromatherapy, whatever your modalities are. Going to show you how to teach you how to integrate that so you can confidently create doable programs in your paid client sessions. No more working unpaid overtime for you. I know what it's like. I used to do that when I first started in this industry. It's not great. It is not great, truly. So our next course start date is January 12th. Enrollment is open now. And when we hit 10 students, it'll be closed and you'll have to wait for the next start date. So if you are at all interested, like if you're a 5 out of 10 interested, we should have a conversation, right? We should have a conversation, see if this is a good fit and get you enrolled so that you know what's coming up, so that you're ready to get started on January 12th. Now, I love the comments and the interaction we've had today. Thank you so much for that. This is amazing. Are there any other questions that you have that I can answer for you in a hot little minute? We'll give you just a minute. If you've got a question for it to come in, I know there's about a 15-second delay here. I love, love, love teaching iridology. My students are the best. So if you are one of the best, I want to talk to you. Sherry's saying thank you. You are most welcome, Sherry. Really want to talk with you and see about getting you into the course, right? Because, and the call is not a sales pitch. It's not a high pressure, strong arm. I know where you live. I'm going to make you enroll. It's really to see if this is what is a good fit for you. And Megan says, I can't do it now, taking other classes, but considering it at a later date. Fantastic, Megan. I look forward to having you in the course in the future. Kelly's saying, so grateful for you. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. And can we have one more example? I don't have any more examples ready for you today, Megan. Good question, though. Carrie says, thank you. It's been great. Jacqueline says, it's going to be a great tool in my toolbox. Megan says, bummer. Megan, thank you. I love that. I love that you're eager to learn. So, so good. And actually, we showed you an example from lymphatic, biliary, and hematogenic. You've seen a connective tissue example from each of the 3 primary constitutions. So that's a good little 30,000-foot overview for you. Thank you again for your interaction today. So good to have you with us. And I look forward to seeing you soon and hopefully having phone calls with many of you. Take good care and bye for now.